Great. We are live with Beardsell, and welcome, Al. Welcome to the Guitarbench interview.
Oh, well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. Honors all ours. Well, let's get started with how you got started with guitars.
Oh, well, I was a longtime musician through the 80s and 90s, and I had some experience with as a teenager with my brother. Was learning how to do some guitar making in Vancouver through Bill Lewis Music, which was the supply company that became Luthier's Mercantile at some point. And so I was aware that people could actually make instruments, and so I did actually make a few things. I was a violin player to begin with, and then as I got into bands and learned how to play guitar, and I became a full-time working musician in Vancouver and then in Toronto. And as most musicians will know, that you have to have some other kind of business to other kind of work to support your life as a musician. So I was working in cabinet making and finishing, and so there just came a point where I was like, well, I could just start building my own, and then which I did, and had some success with that, and then other people around me wanted me to start building stuff for them. So I've just been making guitars since the mid '90s, and have not stopped since. So there you are.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. I still remember when I tried one of your guitars. A buddy of mine had gotten it. There's one of the early ones actually from 12th fret when.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, I think he got it on the recommendation of Dave Wren, who's got really great taste. And we played it, and it was like, oh my goodness, this is so great. And you were doing stuff that not many people were up to, at least at that time.
Fairly common now, I would say.
Well, I think you helped to popularize some of the aspects of it.
Thanks,
maybe we could, maybe you could just go a little bit into kind of your inspiration and how you're building your guitars.
Okay, well, so as a builder, I was very influenced by being a player and wanting certain things that would help me do gigs, and so the side porting of the guitars was very helpful as far as being an acoustic musician, to hear what I was doing. So you were talking earlier before we got on the air about whether electric guitars have whether their resonance was significant to the way the guitar is amplified, and it may not be that it has a significance in the signal path, but I think the way you react to it, the way you play it, the way it feels in your hand, I think that can be very significant, actually. So it maybe it doesn't affect so much what comes out of the amplifier. I think too much resonance, the extra resonance of the guitar, can bring a darkness that's not so useful to the electric guitar. But I think the way it reacts in your hands I think it's very important to have something that's quite reactive. And so I spent a lot of time making electric guitars that felt like playing an acoustic guitar, but could also be amplified quite loudly and not feedback as well. So it's in introducing the resonance factor, but also not, but also keeping the sustain, because those two things, sustain and resonance, they can be. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm nerding off on you, but this is but those are the two things that seems to counteract one another. You either have a lot of one or less of the other. So those are the kinds of things that I was kind of most concerned with, and like you said, the way things look and the cosmetic factor as well. You want it to look good, but generally having a guitar that looked and sounded and played like an acoustic guitar, but you could run through an amplifier and have it not implode on you, sonically speaking.
Right. Right. Okay. Sorry. Awesome. No problems at all. And so I mean, I think everybody knows you build both acoustics and electrics, both very awesome types of instruments, and I'm wondering if there's a sort of swing towards one, or sort of your output's about equal.
So I've definitely taken a bit of a turn away from straight up acoustics. Like I said, I've tried to amalgamate the two things as well as possible. So I'm really spending a lot more time with electric guitars and building amplifiers. So more as an exercise in understanding the relationship between the two, the two parts, the two things are two halves of the same instrument, essentially. So yeah, so I would, yeah, to answer your question, I have definitely moved towards the electric guitars, building pickups, building guitars that are useful tools, and also just because acoustic guitars, even when they're I know a lot of people play acoustic guitars and love them, but generally speaking, even with an acoustic guitar, you tend to plug them in and essentially and they become an amplified instrument. So making something that is a useful crossover, that is a bit of both. That is my main. So archtop guitars, semi-acoustic guitars. That's my main focus right now.
Wonderful. And I suppose one of the questions that I like to ask anyone who makes their own pickups, it's a little bit of maybe an unfair question, kind of like asking what's your favorite child in many respects, is, do you have a favorite pickup, or at least pickup design?
Yes. Well, favorite. There's so many different characteristics involved, which is kind of the very interesting part of electric guitars. I mean, like there are many ways to do the same thing, and bigger whines, darker sounds, but using narrower gauge wires, brighter sounds, different magnets, different wires, different insulation builds. All those things, they create a different feeling. I love the P90. I've been doing a lot of crossover between the Jazzmaster and P90, making them into one kind of pickup.
Right.
And I find those to be very useful, a really good sounding pickup. The D-Armon, the 44 gauge wire with a fridge magnet, that's and a huge whine, so like a really big DC resistance, and those things together, they seem to they seem to do different things, but what they add up to is something that's really interesting. So a crossover, a lot of crossovers right now, but classics, humbucker, and and a Strat or the tele pickup. I mean, it's hard to go wrong with those. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, but like P90s and Jazzmaster pickups, they're basically big single coils.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah,
They're big single coils, which is and I mean, you've probably noticed this, but recently we've seen kind of like an increase in the interest of perhaps the lesser celebrated pickups, and that's so I do see more folks doing gold foils, even though that's a group term. It's like an amalgamated term, lots of different gold foils inside there. Same with the Jazz Masters, and P90s have always been pretty popular, but I think more recently they've become a little bit more popular as well. And I think in terms of pickup winding, the one term that we always see, and I just wanted your opinion on this, is scatterwound hand winding.
Yeah.
In your experience, if you felt that makes a big difference, a minor difference, or not much?
It's the difference between a pickup that sounds good and the pickup that is predictable. you know what I mean? Like a Seymour Duncan has a certain kind of sound, and an old Strat pickup that's hand wound has a certain kind of sound too. And quite frankly, I'm definitely of the scatterwind, vibe, just because it's a little bit unpredictable, and there's a bit more of a character that is something you can't necessarily program into a computer or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just like you want to make something that's a little bit unique every time. So
I can understand that. I think I do get asked a question somewhat when people refer to it obliquely, saying, "Oh, are these scatterwounds? How do they sound?" But I think the only frustration for me for scatterwound is that I can't, like you mentioned, there's a degree of unpredictability. Like I can't say for sure that it'll sound like this. I say, well, it'll sound kind of like this. This will be the ballpark, because even if you like a P90 will sound more or less like a P90 most of the time, even if it's scatterwound. I mean, and obviously you get a curve and it will fall somewhere along the curve.
Yeah.
Whereas a straight up one would be more or less within a narrower range. And so I'm like, well, the scatter one, you probably should play it first. See how.
Exactly, but everything, it's if you don't, if it's something that doesn't speak to you or doesn't support the way you want to express yourself, then yeah, you got to try something else. And so,
I suppose. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, you go ahead. That's fine.
Right. I was actually going to say, well, unlike acoustics, you're kind of stuck, right? So if you don't like the sound of mahogany, you can't. Or at least it's impractical to swap out the back and sides. Whereas if you don't particularly like the sound of the pickup on an electric, well, you can switch it out with much less work.
Yes.
Yes. So I think that's the cool thing about electrics, and that's why you see so many modifications going on. And I think on the whole, people are okay with modifications, right? Because it's switching out pickups.
Yeah, and whereas the electric guitar is one half of the program, which is the guitar, the player. Okay, there's three halves: the player, the guitar, and the amplifier. So you have to make all those things work together, and then there's the whole if you want to go beyond the patch cord to pedals and all that stuff too, then you know, do you want to make the guitar more neutral sounding so that you can do more with pedals or whatever, or more gain? You know, those are all things that you have to be aware of, and
absolutely. I've been very careful not to talk about pedals so far, because I think that's like its own little show, and amps as well. I think, like, you know, those are potentially, you know, you could do a pedal show, right? Just all related to pedals, but you know, it's fascinating to hear your approach of having something feel like an acoustic, but react like an acoustic. More importantly, I suppose.
Exactly.
But have the functionality of an electric.
Exactly. I mean, you see a lot of like in the 70s when people were making guitars that were extremely dense and heavy, and that somehow heavy guitars were somehow better. And I mean, you can get a very sustainy guitar, and it will be it doesn't have a lot of resonance. It just, but you so you can run it into a 100-watt Marshall, and it will just do the thing. It doesn't create a liminal space that comes around the guitar. It is what it is. It's if you're trying to create something else, like a negative space that's between the guitar and the player, then you have to have other resonances in the guitar. Well, this is what I'm thinking about anyway. I want other noises. I want other things to creep in. And since I've started making amplifiers too, like I've ditched all of the pedals. I've just run straight in, and there's just a lot to explore there, if you're willing to. I mean, the amp, reverb, and tremolo, and that's pretty much all I've got at this point. And I find it really liberating in a way, just to explore those things in a very minimal way.
Well, actually, speaking of tremolos, I recently tried one of those Yamaha Leslie type amplifiers, the ones with the rotating speakers.
Oh yeah.
To give that effect, the Doppler effect. Those are super cool. Those are super cool, but it's quite old, and when it creaks a bit, you get a bit nervous, you know. It's a bit of speaker flying out at you.
But that's part of the fun, right?
Yeah, you need an element of danger, I guess.
That's right. That's right.
And definitely going back to the 70s guitars as well. I think the old joke was, when I had a slip disc, somebody said, "Oh, what happened? Were you playing sports?" Like, no, I picked up my '79 Les Paul Special.
Right.
And that's what gave me the slip disc. I think that was the joke, on the joke for a long time.
Right.
But great, fantastic. I suppose now is the time to ask you, if you have anything interesting going on, or anything that we should be looking out for from Beardsell Guitars.
Well, right now I'm just working through a big run of my smallest archtop semi-acoustic guitar, the 7E, and I'll be doing it in a number of different pickup configurations, mainly using. I've been making these little gold foil. I know it's kind of a fashionable look, but but they're really just Firebird mini humbuckers, and I find them to be very they're nice and quiet, and they have a good amount of output, and I pot them very, very minimally, so that there's just a ever so slight bit of microphonicness in it, and I find all those interactions are that makes beauty.
For sure. And on that fantastic note, I think time is almost up. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I think we all hold hope that we might be able to one day play some of your guitars, and perhaps we might be able to organize a sort of a workshop tour, and take a look at some of those guitars that are in progress.
By all means, thank you very much.
Thanks, Al.
Talk to you soon.
Likewise, take care.
You too.